This podcast is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the Business Psychos and does not reflect the viewpoints of their current or former employers or clients. Thank you.
It's the Business Psychos, and today we're gonna talk it out. The podcast about what execs shouldn't talk about. Connecting executives and those who aspire. We're here to have a conversation, yeah, we're gonna light the fire. It's the Business Psychos. Yeah. The Business Psychos.
Welcome to Business Psychos, where we discuss how to navigate the complexity of corporate culture and modern life without becoming a psycho. I'm Mary, she's Katie, and we are the Business Psychos.
Hi, Mary.
Hi,
How are
Katie.
you doing? I'm good. We made it. If this is the first episode you're listening to, I would encourage you to turn back and start from the top in episode 1. We're going to talk about our takeaways from this past season. It's really hard for me to not just want to have a big ol' celebration fest about Mary, but I'm going to save that to embed it in the rest of this conversation.
You're the wind beneath my wings, Katie.
Before we started working on this, I'd spent a lot of time really wanting and wishing for an ideal collaborator. This conversation is going to be about our takeaways from this production season, how the division of labor has been so naturally occurring. And by the way, for the listeners, to mention that this silent hidden back end of this podcast, which is the pre-production, is a world-class operational model. Another thing, and I don't know if Mary's going to make me cut this, but working with Mary
Probably.
is legitimately like if you have a special ops person who is like, I can't tell you about what I've done.
That's to kill you.
I have to kill you. Mary's track record and level of accomplishment, there is no better example of this for me to see, but the operational setup of this podcast is extraordinary. I'll say this weekend for me was spent doing a lot of work, and actually how that ties into this is that I am very good at getting very excited about how to do things, and the really tense part for me is when I have to create the execution plan for it, and I get really grouchy. So I spent the entire weekend working on execution plans for things and getting really grouchy, and that's where you just shine. So yeah, I was really missing the Mary counterpoint. But how was your weekend?
Wow. First of all, thank you. You really are the wind beneath my wings. And
I'm obsessed.
You are, your vision and your energy, and you've said it before, like our little yin yang, our complementary way. It's really remarkable. And I too have found that the right personality to collaborate with can be not a challenge, but it sometimes it takes a little more work than you'd imagine. And not that this isn't a lot of work, and that we haven't had our little roadblocks or bumps in the road, but I don't know. Anyway, I'm very happy. I'll share some of my thoughts about the show more in a minute. And now I'm gonna, unlike you who had a grouchy and working weekend, I actually had a relaxed one. I had my good friend Dave, who you know, Katie, out to the house. And on Saturday we went for an amazing bike ride, and we ended up coming across a hawk building its nest. Middle-agedom has brought birdwatching into my life. Don't laugh, it's coming for us all. But the hawk was building its nest and it was hunting for fish. And I was standing by the side of the road, like, how extraordinary is this? And I look to my left and there's like deer grazing. I look to my right and there's like an egret like swoops down. And, so I'm like in a David Attenborough nature documentary, like playing itself out. Then I went home and I planted some seedlings and potted around the vegetable patch. All this sounds mundane and boring, and actually it was quite amazing. And it helped me start this work week off on a positive emotional note. And, you know, Katie, you and I always talk about gratitude and like kind of stopping and smelling the roses and like being appreciative of things. And I think what I felt about this weekend, that I was grateful that I gave myself permission to make a little space in my life to do those kinds of things, like simply be, you know, be aware, be present, observe what's going on. So yeah, I don't have to be a productive workhorse all the time.
Hey, shout out to Dave too. His Instagram handle for his photography is not to be missed. What is it? It's David Grant Photography.
Yeah, we'll give him a call out on our page.
Check out his Instagram after you check out the Business Psychos Pod Instagram and follow us. So today, our topic is us. So we are so proud to have wrapped our first season of the Business Psychos podcast. So in today's show, we're going to read some of your feedback. We are also going to share our reflections about why this show is hitting a chord with so many people right now. Then we'll wrap up with our thoughts for season 2.
Hang tight, psychos. We'll be right back.
I love your use of psychos. It works for you. You have professional broadcaster energy.
If this is like we're playing a drinking game, things you have never ever heard about oneself. You have broadcaster energy.
I'll tell you, you do. And the reason that I have these strong opinions is I spend a lot of time listening to you.
All right. I want to start by thanking our audience for sending in both constructive and supporting show notes. Katie, we knew that this would be a labor of love and that we were going to learn by doing. We knew there would be challenges and bumps in the road and that our vision of this, whatever this is, would evolve. If I look at all the feedback we're receiving, the common thread seems to be one of relief that there's a place to talk openly and honestly about our relationship to work. And making the discussion pragmatic, but also calling out some of the underlying norms that affect us emotionally and which aren't always given the light of day. So the first comment I want to read comes from Anonymous about the ageism show. The person writes, "You and Katie have the guts to discuss tough topics that others dance around or even ignore to their detriment. I'm so glad you're both in a position to be able to voice these concerns. Ageism has often troubled me, thinking back on my 20s, 30s, 40s, and now. Hearing this data helps me know I'm certainly not alone. If it hasn't already been suggested, please consider discussing more about the balancing act of career, parenting, and caring for aging family. Maybe even mention parenting a child with special needs, or emphasizing the benefits of flexible working hours to both employees and their employers." She goes on to say that she's not sharing this on social media because she's looking for a job, but is sharing and discussing the podcast amongst friends. Thank you, Anonymous. We will be doing a show on personas in the coming months, and we'll certainly be touching on the tension people feel about prioritizing personal and professional responsibilities. The traditional 9-to-5 with a 10-minute commute doesn't apply to many people these days. Most jobs, especially senior ones, expect long days, sometimes nights and weekends. And so the demands of work have increased, shrinking the time you have left to be a human being. And being a parent and taking care of older parents or special needs children are the most important jobs we have as humans. Thank you for your comment and recommendation. The other comment I have is from Irene Jones, 7485, superfan, on our overachieving episode. She writes, "I nodded my head a lot during this podcast and immediately listened to it again. The part about it being addictive and what you were giving up. Well, everything really. Balance is so important. Bless us all that we may show up for our life." Wow. Thanks, Irene Jones, 7485. So well said. I mean, pretty much sums it up. Back to what the show is about, right? This balance between the practicality of earning money to support ourselves and our families with being a human being with the desire to experience oneself in a meaningful way. We aren't alive to be employees. We're alive to understand ourselves and have a human experience, which includes being able to take care of ourselves. If we lose ourselves to our work, we give away our lives and maybe even lose our humanity. And finally, we've gotten some feedback on the production quality of some of the shows, and we appreciate you calling it out. We're doing the show by ourselves and learning as we go. That includes everything from production environment and technical aspects, which we expect will improve over time. I do want to thank everyone for their patience, because I know we've all become accustomed to watching and listening to professionally produced shows. We have some plans for the next season, which we hope will smooth some of this out.
Yeah, the quote that comes to mind for me is the Dolly Parton quote, which is, "It costs a lot of money to look this trashy." For our podcast, it takes a lot of time to sound whatever, fill in the blank, and different episodes have their like strengths and weaknesses relative to production quality. So even to the point of listening to the credits of other podcasts, I've never appreciated how much goes into the production of a podcast. And I think most people can relate to this, which is once you try to do something, the way you appreciate it changes. Versus being a consumer of it, which is a very specific and important vantage point. We want to hear it. And people who have pointed stuff out to us have really helped us up our game, because it helps us understand what people find tolerable and what people find listenable. And when you're producing your own podcast, something I think that is without question a line that you're trying to ride, because it costs a lot of time to sound this trashy. We both knew coming into this, or at least could sense, I had very strong premonition about our point of view. I ran admissions for a career transition program for a couple of years, which meant I conducted thousands of interviews with high-performing professional people about their careers. And for many people, they would express that as one of the most intimate conversations they'd had. I think I might have maybe I talked about that before on the podcast. But for this conversation, it's a constructive space where we want to take this seriously in terms of the importance of having access to capital, which is a very real need and fantastic benefit of a professional life, but also all of the concessions, many of them that are made without any type of conscious consideration. So as a result of that, folks spend decades in a career and realize they made concessions that they never even willingly and consciously surfaced, and that can be really painful. There was one very senior executive, the feedback that they gave me, one of the things that they said was that they really appreciate that we're not coming from a position of being prescriptive. We're having a nuanced discussion that examines multiple sides of a complex, multifaceted aspect of our lives. And so this is sort of an amalgam of a lot of the feedback that we've received, which is that what it's doing is it's opening up for folks the internal consideration of really mapping their career to their values and making those types of decisions and making them now instead of waiting for the longer term regret of continuing to make the concessions and then like having a lot of time go by. So that's been really really meaningful as our production grows and as our reach increases, which is also part of our intention as we move forward, that the feedback is going to become more pointed because we're going to extend out past our immediate network. And I just want to put a stake in the ground right now that we welcome any respectful discourse. So regardless,
Absolutely.
you don't have to agree with us. We're not looking for that. We're looking to have a discussion, and hopefully the podcast has demonstrated that to date. So that's what I have on reflections on feedback so far.
Next section, psycho reflections.
So reflecting on the past 10 episodes that we have produced so far, I will say that my favorites are the last 3 and actually 4 episodes that we've done, specifically because we keep getting better. And we keep getting better because both Mary and myself we're really tuned towards optimizing things, and we're really interested in making this better for the listeners. Today, as we are taping this, Authenticity just went out. I think to date, it's our strongest episode.
Yeah.
And I think the reason that it's particularly good, similar to why the other episodes are also, are also good, is that we're taking something on with a really practical perspective versus a theoretical one. So we discuss the theory, but we also examine the practice of it and how it actually plays out. And I think that's one of the things, too, that has to do with these two disparate camps that we're seeking to unify in this podcast, which is take this job and, shove it, or take this job and love it. Like, there's this middle road about that really at the end of the day has to do with ultimately accountability and reconciliation of some of the harsh realities of just what the situation is, relative to the idealism of what it could possibly be, and going to war with that. So I would say Authenticity, I think we did a really good job with that. Right now, currently editing Shame. By the time this comes out, people have heard Shame. Very two-parter, very strong, as we're talking about power, hierarchy, bullying, in a way that I think brings a lot to the table. So how about you, Mary?
I totally agree with those two. And it's almost like it's a distant memory, and then we'll go through the edits again, right, and look at it, and I forget how good they are. And actually, I think because the process to produce these shows is so long that sometimes there's the right amount of distance to it. So Authenticity and Shame are my favorite as well. I don't know. I think the first thing I just want to say, I'm proud of us, right? Like that we've been talking about doing this for a while, and it's something to talk about stuff and another to actually do it. And you just mentioned accountability, and I think that's a really big deal for both of us. That's something that we both have in common. And so I'm not surprised that we got the show going, and I'm not surprised that we're holding ourselves to a high bar and continuing to raise the bar. I think I'm surprised, and you're not, because you felt and saw this, but I'm surprised and humbled about how the show's resonating with people. And I know you said it from the beginning, and I had a sense that it would, but seeing and receiving the feedback directly from our audience, I think is really special, but really, really surprising for me. And I think that we're at a really unique crossroads right now in our history. We're at a unique place, and it's a transformational time. And it's obvious, like, the workforce is changing. We talk about the statistics and trends in the show. I don't think we need events like the pandemic and quiet quitting or the work from home controversy to demonstrate that employees are reevaluating things. And parallel and related to that is that more people seem to be doing more inner work, more psychological self-inquiry about who they are, and getting to know oneself in our truest form, and to figure out what holds meaning for us and what are the things that we value most. I think in the past, it was probably common for people in their 40s and 50s to hit this period of contemplation, like the proverbial midlife crisis. But now we have millennials and Gen Z who are right out of the gate questioning things that I don't believe prior generations did, at least not at the scale that we're seeing today. And the boomer generation, as they approach the twilight of their lives, of course, there will be continued introspection. So if you think about it, we have everyone thinking in more profound ways than maybe at any time in our history. And so I think we think about our audience, Katie, we have people coming to us from the place of deep self-reflection. But then others are finding us because they were just laid off or demoted or passed over for a promotion or frustrated that none of the recruiters are calling them back, or because they keep waking in the middle of the night stressing about their job. I think the one thing for me that's emerging about this show is that despite some of the scary statistics, despite trends which might be quite worrying, and regardless of how divided or depressing the world feels right now, there's something positive and hopeful here beneath the surface. That moving yourself toward truth and honesty is the right way. That's the path, no matter what, even if the truth is painful. We had some stats about ageism and the extra challenge older people have looking for work. The numbers are disappointing and they're daunting, but there's a silver lining there. Like, you're not your job. You're not on Earth, alive at this extraordinary time to just be an employee. There are other important and wonderful things you could do. So I'm going to counter your Dolly quote with a Churchill quote, which is so us, and say, Churchill said, an optimist sees an opportunity in every calamity. And I think what's becoming clear to me about Business Psychos is that it's a business podcast about being a human spiritual being. Right? We'll continue to talk about the challenges of the modern workforce here. But above and beyond it, no matter what you are going through professionally, I want to use the show to remind you of your specialness, of your value. And that's not in your job. And if the only thing you do in life is to recognize and believe this, then you have had a successful life. And I think then I'll feel that this has been a successful show.
Hang tight, psychos. We'll be right back.
What just happened to me is something that's happened numerous times while recording the podcast, is that Mary will say something that it takes me a long time to just recover from absorbing it. So I'm sure the listeners feel the same way I do. I am still absorbing Mary's incredible thoughts and words. So in this final section for this wrap-up episode, we want to talk a little bit about what's coming up in season 2, what to expect, what our priorities are. Season 1 was about developing the production of the podcast. And so a lot of this is stuff that's happening that's invisible to a listener. It's a pre-production and the post-production. And that has to do with the things that a listener wouldn't see but would be obvious, which would be that Mary develops the topics each week. Mary structures the scripting and makes sure that the episodes are succinct and bring a lot of value to listeners. Mary does all of the back end for the organization because there are so many moving parts in producing this, so that all of them get done on schedule so that we're releasing in a predictable and timely manner. And then on the other side, it's all the stuff with like the sound and the editing of the file and, and then uploading and hosting and then in creating socials and stuff that's on the other side of it. The purpose of this particular season was to really create that engine so that it's functional. And now that we're shifting gears, I guess, to continue with that analogy, is that we're looking to increase the quality of the parts in it. So to make video production a stronger offering. So more to come on that. And I imagine Mary will have more to speak to on that. And the other thing is to expand our reach. So this is using more strategic thinking about how to get this, the work that we're doing out and extending the ripples of this, be it through strategies that have to do with digital offerings, but also, other things like guesting on podcasts, doing thought leadership. We're already being asked to come and speak in organizations, having business psychos. So expanding our reach. And for listeners right now, what I would ask is that if you have been getting value out of this and you connect with our intention, that you share the podcast with your friends and the people that you feel it would resonate with, that you subscribe, and also that you review it, because it turns out rating and reviewing a podcast is one of the things that puts it on the radar of larger platforms in the world. To go into your listening platform and rate it. So even if it's just putting the 5 stars in, or however many stars, hopefully it's 5. And writing a review is actually like the probably one of the most extraordinary things that you can do for us, because that really helps prospective listeners understand what the pod is about from somebody other than us. Because listen, we're biased. It's so it's good to hear from other people. So Mary, what are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, you glossed over all the stuff that you're doing, or you mentioned it, but you didn't attribute it to yourself. So yeah, just saying post-production isn't nearly the mark of the amount and the immensity of the work that you take on, and the creativity. It's much more complicated than you could ever imagine, and the amount of dedication and time and focus that you take to make the show what it is, Katie, is remarkable. And of course, you have a brilliant design and creative mind for our marketing, whether it's on our socials or on YouTube. So just let's make sure we call that out.
Thanks, Mary. It's a lot of fun.
Next season, so we have great topics coming up. I mentioned earlier we'll have a show on balancing different personas at work. This includes the challenge between personal responsibilities, like caring for your family and trying to climb the corporate ladder. A show about identity differences and relationships at work. We have a show on change management that's going to be way different than anything you've read on LinkedIn. And I think to your point, Katie, we are doing this show for you, our listeners and our audience, and we value and appreciate feedback, and especially recommendations about the topics that are important to you. And I think we'll start to incorporate more of these comments, questions, and recommendations into the shows themselves in the future. So send them in. I find it a little interesting that some people feel scared, like the anonymous earlier, to comment publicly. We get a lot of feedback, and most of it's through the Business Psychos email or DMs on our socials, with folks asking to be kept anonymous. It's interesting because I think of us as a work-friendly podcast. We've said that before, Katie. We're not like subversive, so it'll be interesting to see as we expand, if people start to feel more comfortable sharing thoughts and perspectives publicly. I think it would be a great goal, because I'd love our audience to see what other audience members are saying and really build a community around the show. I think people will be surprised to know how many people feel exactly as you do, and to realize you're not alone, and that the difficult things you may be going through aren't because of some failure or because you're not good enough. So if anyone have any thoughts on why people might be feeling fearful of posting publicly, I have a theory, but I'll keep it to myself for right now. I'd love to hear from you. And this is a great segue to really wrapping up this particular show and this season. So I'll end by thanking our audience again for tuning in and being supportive and engaging with us. The concept of continuous improvement is an important one to both of us, both personally and professionally, and definitely applies to the show. We want to continue to evolve it and make it something special and helpful. These are challenging times, but it isn't just darkness. Sometimes you have to go through a little darkness to get to the other side, where it's lighter and easier. When things are difficult, please remember everything is temporary and it will pass. And also, I like to think we're all doing a lot better than we probably give ourselves credit for. So stay tuned for more shows. Send us your feedback. Take care of yourself, and go out and walk around and look at birds and flowers and let yourself be a human being.
I just want to echo you, piggyback, leapfrog.
You're doing work theater again. You're doing work theater stuff. You want to follow on. Can I follow on to it? I have to have like a little, like something kind of like a BS, like we know we're doing it kind of thing. Like maybe we can
like
have
a
little
red
graphic pop up or something. It's like BS meter, like
One of those like 1970s like cop light things, they'd stick on top of the car. I want to echo appreciation for the audience. This is so meaningful to both of us, and I do want to emphasize it is a lot of work and it is a labor of love. And so your feedback, if you feel kind of reluctant about sharing it, know that that is the wind beneath our wings, is hearing how it's impacting you and why it matters to you. And that also the feedback helping point us in the right direction of optimizing this is also the wind beneath our wings, because to us it represents engagement and support in our continued growth. So as a final ask, I do want to reemphasize how much it matters to us to extend and expand the reach of what we're doing. So please like, subscribe, rate the show. Podcasts survive by this.
and share with other psychos you know.
Absolutely. So without any further ado, we will see you in season 2. Oh no.
Bye.
Cut that.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please like, subscribe, and share with other psychos you know. We'd also love to hear from you, so hit us up on our socials. You can find us on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook under @BusinessPsychosPod. Bye.